Hello my beautiful friends, it's Amanda here, and today we are doing a highly requested video. This is my top ColourPop palettes, past and present. This was pretty difficult for me because I really do enjoy a lot of ColourPop palettes. If you've been around this channel for any amount of time, that's probably pretty obvious. I love my ColourPop palettes. I swatch and review almost all of them that have come out for many, many years now. And basically for the duration of this channel, ColourPop has been a favorite brand of mine. I am a ColourPop affiliate, so if you decide to shop anything on the ColourPop site, whether it's the palettes that I mentioned in this video or anything else, I do have an affiliate code. It's just my first name, Amanda, and it saves you 10% on most things on the ColourPop site. There are some exceptions, of course, as always. Make no mistake, I do not like these palettes because I'm an affiliate. I'm an affiliate because I like the brand. It's been a while since I've done a top ColourPop palettes video. In the past, I've done rankings, I've done best and worst, I've done my top 10 palettes that are currently available. I do feel like no matter what I do, there's gonna be somebody wishing I did the other thing. If I do the currently available palettes only, then people say, I wish I knew your favorite discontinued ones. And when I include discontinued palettes, people say, oh, why are you talking about this? I can't get it anymore. So we're gonna do a little bit of everything here. These are, I guess you could say, my top 20 ColourPop palettes of all time because I am including both available and discontinued palettes. I actually have a middle section as well that's palettes that are currently out of stock, but I'm hoping will be restocked. Some I have more hope for than others. This isn't really a ranking video. I'm not going to rank these from 20 to number 1. So this is going to be in no particular order other than I am going to separate the discontinued and currently available palettes. I could just switch these around so much and rearrange them from 1 to 20 so easily that I do think it makes a ranking a little bit pointless. Day to day, I'm feeling some colors more than others, and there is definitely a nostalgia factor here as well because I do have a deep longing in my heart for some of these discontinued palettes to come back, and I think that makes me hold them in a higher esteem in some ways, if that makes sense. Basically, we're just lucky that I could narrow it down to 20, okay? That's really what I'm getting at. These are my favorites. I like them all for different reasons, but overall, these are palettes that I gravitate towards. I like to use a lot. Sometimes I like to combine them and use them together, and this exercise really started with me sitting down, not looking at my palettes and just writing down on a piece of paper which palettes come to mind when I start to think about my favorites. Then I used that off the top of my head list as I went through my collection to pull those palettes to see if there was anything that jogged my memory about how much I liked it, maybe something that had been kind of in the back of the drawer for a while that I hadn't laid eyes on. And I'm happy to report that the list is pretty much exactly the same as the one that I wrote down sight unseen. My hope is that by including some discontinued palettes, it will either encourage you to go back through your own older palettes collection and show them some love, maybe dig out one of these palettes that you haven't used in a while, or maybe it will inspire us to do some build your own palettes or something along those lines. I also think it will be interesting to see a little bit of that makeup archive. Maybe you'll see some palettes or collections that were never on your radar. Maybe you just weren't shopping from the brand, or maybe you weren't even really into makeup when some of these came out, because some of these are pretty old. All that means is ColourPop has been making hits for many, many years. So I'm gonna start with the discontinued palettes. We'll just rip the band-aid off. We'll get past the pain of what once was. And then I'll move into the palettes that I'm hoping will be restocked. Like I said, I have more hope for some of these than others. And then I'll end my list with the currently available favorites. Just keep in mind, I do have swatch and comparison review tutorials already on my channel with basically all of these palettes. So I am gonna link those videos in the description box if you see something that catches your eye and you want more information about it. Because we're talking about 20 different palettes in this video, I'm not gonna go super in depth about any of them, but I do have those resources linked. All you gotta do is open the description box, scroll down, and click right over to the past review video. I have 9 of my top 20 that are discontinued palettes, so let's start with those 9 first. Here they are. Do you see any you recognize? Let's start with a strong throwback. This is the All I See Is Magic palette, and it is from Holiday 2017. Believe it or not, this palette was actually sold in Sephora. There was a short time before Ulta was a ColourPop retailer that there were just a handful, 2 or 3 products, palettes available in Ulta and Sephora for this 2017 holiday release. This palette is so beautiful. I love all of these jewel tones. I do wish there were a couple more mattes, maybe one more colorful matte, but overall this palette is just a beautiful, neutrally warm jewel tone type of color story that I absolutely love. As you can see, this super old school packaging, there's no shade names inside. All the shade names are on this big sticker on the back. This is a true throwback, but this is something that has really been a favorite of mine for many, many years. Now let's talk about a collab. This will be no surprise. If you saw my review of this, you'll know, first of all, the nostalgia factor really got me. I'm a huge Hocus Pocus fan. I love it. I watch it every year, constantly in the fall especially. I love the packaging. I love the color story. We have more of that neutral with some jewel tones type of palette that I really do gravitate towards. And I also love to pair this one with the All I See Is Magic palette. I guess for responsibility purposes, I should not necessarily advise you to use a 5-year-old palette, but you know, be better than me, I guess is all I can say. I love the way these look together. I love them individually. I love them. Now, this one is kind of a surprise even to me because I do not love many pastel shades in general, but this is one that I just keep going back to. I love how it's curated with these little soft neutrals, and it's very sheer and sparkly, and I just love every single eye look that I do. Look, my nail polish even matches the Super Shark Shadow shade in here. I really can only name one other pastel palette off the top of my head that I love, the Soma Amazing palette, but this one just keeps popping back up for me, so I thought it deserved a spot in my favorites. Now, another Disney collab. I feel like Disney collabs are hit or miss, and this was a very strong hit for me. I do think it's one of the best Disney collaboration collections, in my opinion, that ColourPop has ever released. The packaging is so stunning. I love the very magical details. I love how cohesive everything is. I love how well the shades work together, and I really, really love the performance of this palette. This is one of the palettes that sparked my green eyeshadow awakening. The other one you will see later on in the video, but this palette is so gorgeous. I love every look that I've ever done with it. I'm very comfortable saying this is one of the best ColourPop palettes of all time, and I think this was too short-lived. I wish it would have been available longer. I wish it would have restocked. There's no fandom playing into this one. I'm not a huge Tinkerbell, huge Peter Pan fan like I am with Hocus Pocus, which I'll admit some nostalgia factors into me loving that palette. But this one is just purely based on the execution, the formula, the shades, the packaging, all such hits for me. Now let's talk about some 12-pan palettes. I feel like the 12-pan palettes of yore are a little bit better than the ones that have come out lately. Maybe it's just, my personal style fit better with the older palettes. First is this Becky G palette. This is the Salvaje palette. I love the packaging. I love this black background with the gorgeous flowers. It looks like embroidery. I Can't get enough of it, and the shades inside are also incredibly beautiful. Again, a balance of neutrals and some colors here. This was the first time that I really started warming up to these brighter turquoise shades. And this was a palette that got so much rotation. I know this pop of blue concept has really been played out, but this came out back in 2018, and this was really a dipping of the toe into brighter colors for me. Pairing these blues with neutrals helped me get out of my comfort zone and really encouraged me to experiment more with color. Salvaje is like Dream Street with the volume turned up, and I love that. Now, another collaboration, another one of my favorite collaborations they've ever done. This is the At Forest Sight palette that they created with Raw Beauty Christie. And this palette, first of all, this foresty, woodlands, mushroomy packaging is so beautiful. It's so Christie. And then inside we get basically a grungy rainbow palette. It's definitely on the warmer side, and it doesn't have quite enough shimmers for my liking, but I love this palette. I have not one bad thing to say about any of the shadows that are in here. I wish that it was just maybe a slightly larger palette, like a 15 pan, and then we could have a couple more shadows, but I just want more of it because I love it so much. Now, this is the Good Sport palette. You may have heard me talk about this throughout the years. This is definitely one of my all-time favorite ColourPop palettes ever. This has some neutrals, some brights, has sort of a jewel tone feeling to it, but it's just so well-rounded. This is the type of palette that I wish I could see more of, because it's not so crazy and colorful and pigeonholed into a monochromatic color story, but it's also a interesting take on neutrals. And this is just such a beloved palette for me, and I know for a lot of other people as well. I did recreate this in a BYOP already, so I'll try to remember to link that for you as well in case you missed out on this beautiful little palette. Where's the petition to bring it back? You know that I ask them all the time privately, right? Like, I'm out here gunning for this palette to come back. Now let's talk about Limoncello and Lush Life, the 2L palettes. The packaging on Limoncello makes me want to go on a European vacation immediately. This is another one of those palettes where the packaging, the color story, and the formulas all came together in this perfect combination for me. The colors inside here match the colors on the packaging. The formulas in this one are so good. I wish every single palette could consistently be like this formula, because each one of these shades is like butter. There are no duds, there's no glitter, there's no sparkly mattes. Everything is cohesive and interesting, but you can get a lot of different types of looks. I just feel like a little ray of sunshine every time I use this palette. Same sort of story for the Lush Life palette. This was another one that I feel was too short-lived. And this is the other palette I was talking about that helped contribute to my green awakening. I can also credit the Kaleidos Sci-Fi Greens palette a little bit with that as well. But this one really took me by surprise. With the greens and blues in there, I didn't expect to fall in love with it as much as I did. And this was love at first swatch, love at first eye look. This is such a tropical, summery. Lush is really the perfect word for it. This is another one that was far too short-lived, and I think this would suit so many people. I can imagine a lot of other people like myself would discover a love for bright colors by using this palette, especially these bright mattes are so stunning. Saturated, yummy, but still somehow wearable. I just can't get enough of this palette. Now I have 5 palettes in my top 20 that are currently out of stock, but I have my fingers crossed that they will come back because they are still showing up on the website. They're just showing up as out of stock, and I'm fairly certain that most of these are going to come back. I am 99% positive that Stone Cold Fox, for example, will come back. Fingers crossed they come back. Here's to hoping. And if they do, I highly recommend snatching them up before they disappear again. Let's start with these two mega palettes. Fingers crossed these come back. I'm pretty positive that Stone Cold Fox will remain a staple and will be the type of thing that restocks pretty frequently, hopefully. I've been getting more into cool tone shades, and I can partially credit this palette and a few others you're going to see later on in the video with helping me discover how truly flattering cooler tones and true neutral tones are on me. Now, this one still hasn't gotten quite as much rotation as my Bare Necessities palette has, but it's close. I would truly call this a staple in my collection, and the silver shade in here, just side note, it's called Magnetic Moon, is one of the most beautiful silver eyeshadows I have ever swatched, touched, or worn in my entire life. Just thought that was worth pointing out. Next, let's talk about Aurora Strike. I know this one has been out of stock for a million billion years. I really hope that it comes back. This is so beautiful. Another unexpected one. There's a lot of cool tones, blues and greens, and quite a few little pastel shades in here as well. So on paper, this should not be a favorite palette for me, and yet I find myself constantly going back to it. It was one of my favorite new releases of the year last year, and when I was writing my little sight unseen list, this was one of the first 10 that I wrote down. So I think that really says a lot about this palette and how it has lodged itself deep into my brain. Speaking of favorites from the year last year, how about my top favorite ColourPop palette of the year, this Troublemaker palette? Another kind of surprise favorite for me, as far as I'm concerned. When I saw the photos of this before I saw it in person, I didn't really feel any type of way about it. I thought it was going to be a little blah, bland, and boring. And it is anything but. This is another one of those palettes like Limoncello where every single shadow is a beautiful high performer. Love to swatch it, love to wear it. These tones are all very neutral-ish. There's a little pinky purpley action in here, but they somehow manage to be an interesting take on neutrals. And I love every single eye look. I actually wore this to a special occasion because I wanted a really glamorous smoky eye type of look, and I knew that this was going to come through for me. Beautiful mixture of undertones, finishes, shades. Everything about this really works for me. I don't care for the packaging too much, but it's the shadows that are top notch. Now, let's talk about some 9pan palettes. We have one that is a little bit of a surprise here. This is the High Tide palette. Now, blue is sort of the last frontier for me, color-wise, for eyeshadows. I have fully embraced green, and now I'm coming around to blue. I'm becoming a blue girl. This palette is in here because this is such a special blue palette. It's not too bright, it's not too warm, it's not too cool, it's not baby powdery type of blue. There's richness, there's brightness, and I love how these mattes in particular have a bit of a neutral undertone to them. It just makes this monochromatic blue palette very approachable in my opinion. It's definitely their best blue palette to date as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's one of their better monochromatic color stories that they've put together. Of course, nothing can dethrone the 9pan palette of my heart, the It's My Pleasure palette. This is another OG palette. You could tell it's still in the plastic packaging from way back in the day. I believe this palette released in 2019, and it's still one of my favorite purple palettes. This is a mix of pinks and purples. We have a couple neutrals, some duochromes. That shade Chicklet is just absolutely the epitome of a purple eyeshadow in my mind. I love the mix of shades. I love the mix of different colors in to support the purple. And this is just, again, one of their most well curated 9pan palettes in my opinion. They have done many 9pans, and this stays on the top of my list. It stays on the top of my stack of palettes. I'm hoping that it will restock again soon. I highly, highly recommend it. If you like to wear purple eyeshadow, you absolutely need this palette. Our very last category, the palettes that are currently available on the website. The final 6 here on my top 20 list are currently available. I really, really hope that between the time I film this and the time I post it, these don't go out of stock, because that will really mess up the flow of this video. But at least today, all 6 of these are currently available. Starting with the megas again, these I'm sure are not a surprise to anyone who has watched any of my videos. First is Bare Necessities, easily one of the most frequently used palettes in my entire collection, and it is incredibly dirty to match. I do try my best to clean my palettes just because I like them to be tidy, and of course I photograph and show things on camera and all that stuff, but I like it to be clean. It just feels more like sanitary. This is beyond help. I have cleaned it so many times and it just cannot be it cannot be cleaned anymore. But I think this is a sign of how much I love this palette and how frequently it stays in rotation. It travels with me. I took this with me when I did my sister's wedding makeup because I knew that it was going to be the type of thing that would be useful for anyone and everyone who wanted me to do their eyeshadow for them. And it's also a champion of my comparison videos, absolute champion. Alongside the It's a Mood palette, one of my other all-time favorite mega palettes, the only way this palette could be improved upon is if it didn't have the glitters. But I started off talking about neutrals mixed with jewel tones, and we're still talking about it. This one is similar to the color story that was in the So Jaded palette that has been long since discontinued. But I like this one better because of the way that it's organized. My eyeballs just appreciate the colors being grouped together like this. And I also think that that makes it a little bit more user-friendly as well. Not just for my eyeballs, but for my brain to functionally create looks with this palette. I know I said I wasn't doing any ranking, and I stick by that, but I do like this one more than Aurora Strike, if that holds any weight for you. I just can't ever get enough of these jewel tones, and this is another real powerhouse when it comes to the comparisons. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck because this can dupe or closely simulate a lot of other ColourPop palettes that come out. This cute little palette is not a box of chocolates, but a neutral eyeshadow palette. The packaging on this is so freaking cute. I love the little heart-shaped theming. I love that when you open up inside, it has little prints that look like little chocolates. This is adorable. I can't tell you how much of a surprise this is formula-wise as well. The shadows are rich and opaque, but they're really blendable. I also think that this is wonderfully suited to a lot of different skin tones. It's easy to layer. It's going to look good on everyone. It's just a beautiful staple neutral type of palette that I think maybe has been a little underrated because there are so many neutrals in the world, but this is an exceptional one in my opinion. Next up is the Off Melrose palette. This is the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today, and this is another one that I love despite the fact that it has a glitter in there. This is an easy go-to palette for me. It's a bit of a twist on neutrals, but it's really just a lot of very reliable neutral type shades. All of these colors look good with each other. You're really not gonna miss no matter what you choose to pair together. This can do really great simple 1 or 2 shadow looks. This is just a great little reliable neutral undertoned neutral palette. I know, there are some warm tones in there too, but that's not the point. Now we're gonna finish off with some 9pan palettes. Is anybody surprised to see that both of the 9pan palettes I'm gonna talk about in this section are purple palettes? I doubt you're surprised. This first one is Lilac You A Lot. You probably knew this was gonna be in here because this was in my favorites bundle a couple years ago when I did a favorites bundle with ColourPop. It was called No Shrinking Violet, and this palette was in my bundle and it is still one of my favorites. This also pairs really, really beautifully with the next palette that I'm going to show you. Especially if you're feeling like this might not go deep enough for you, it goes wonderfly with the Orchid You Not palette, which may be perhaps too dark for some folks. So I like to use these two together because I think they just blend so beautifully. You really get the best of all worlds, some softer, more pinky tone colors, and then these are definitely richer and more of a brownish red leaning type of color story. Orchid You Not actually reads almost neutral when it's next to Lilac You a Lot. I just think the two color stories work so well together. Really enjoy them both separately and together. I'm not saying that you need to buy both of them, but I'm also not judging you if you do. This is a judgment-free purple palette hoarding zone, okay? I know I said I couldn't rank these, and I can't. I mean, I don't want to. I could, but I don't want to. But I will tell you, for everybody who hung around through all of that palette talk, if I had to, just off the top of my head right now, give you a top 5, in no particular order, my top 5 would be Good Sport. All I See Is Magic. I love that palette. What a jewel tone dream. I feel like that color story was kind of ahead of its time. I love it. So Good Sport, All I See Is Magic. Bare Necessities is just such a staple for me. It's such a good palette. So I would put that probably in my top 5. And then, okay, that's 3. It's My Pleasure, the ultimate purple palette. I love it so, so much. And actually, my number 5 spot is the Troublemaker palette. I have just been loving it. It was my number 1 ColourPop palette of 2022. I just think it's beautiful. So that's my top 5. All I See Is Magic, Good Sport, Bare Necessities, It's My Pleasure, and Troublemaker. I reserve the right to change my mind about my rankings at any given time, as should you. And remember, we all have changing tastes, changing styles, and each individual has different preferences too. So I may have listed a palette here that you don't really love. Maybe there's your top favorite palette that I didn't really love. That's the beauty of having so many options, is I feel like there's really something for everybody out there. So I would love to hear what your top favorite palettes are. Do we have any of the same favorites? Are you eyeing any of these? I always love to hear what you think about things too. So make sure you leave all your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye. What am I trying to say? Oof. Oof. You think I'm joking? I've had the exact same person comment on one video saying, I wish that you had included your discontinued favorites too. And then in an end of the year favorites video say, I'm sad that you're mentioning this palette that nobody can get. So you really can't win. Really can't win no matter what. Just gonna do my best. It's all we can do. It's all any of us can do. Look how cool this nail polish is. It reminds me of my moonstone ring. Isn't it so pretty? It's Good Vibes or Good Vibes Only from Color Club. I forget. I'll link it in the description box, but I really liked it because it reminded me of my moonstone ring. And it kind of matches my eyeshadow too. Love that. Don't yell at me if we have different favorites, okay? I'm glad you like what you like. I am. I love that for you. Lemon Fancy Water. I got this little Ulta lip oil because so many people recommended it to me, and it does feel really good. I am kind of addicted to applying it because it feels so great. The color reminds me of the little Givenchy lip balm that I have been very hooked on. Believe it or not, the Ulta one's quite a bit less expensive. This packaging is so cute and so pretty. I love it. They better restock the Aurora Strike palette. It's been out of stock for so long. That better not be limited edition. There's nothing I can do about it, but I can use my angry voice. No, I didn't wear earrings today. Is that it? Did I do it? Oh, by the way, I'm wearing the Off Melrose palette today. This is my favorite little neutral-ish. I call it a baby smoky eye because it's a little bit of a smoky eye, but it's not really that intense. A little baby smoky eye that is pretty much my go-to look with the Off Melrose palette. I have a lot of neutrals in my favorites, but also a lot of colorful palettes. It's a balance. Life's about balance. Alright, I hope that this was fun for you. I hope it was useful. Thanks for watching. I'm always happy that you're here. I really appreciate you. And I just think that you are so cute and fun to be around and special and sweet. And I love your face. And I will see you real soon in another video. Okay? Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.